7:30, which is unusual. We're right on time with that. And actually 7:29, so I think I finally got everything working. Can you hear okay now?
I can, yes.
Okay, well, I think we
I
got...
have my in my ear.
I see, that helps.
Yeah.
And I say we got a new wire for the microphone and a new setup for the other mic, so I'm hopeful that we can stop this thing of... Last week we recorded the whole thing with no sound. So,
I know.
I know. So I just go in and delete it all because that's embarrassing. You know, people do tune in, and you know they tune in, and as you said, you can't read lips, so it's just dead silent. There's nothing, and I don't even know what happened last week. I don't know. I just didn't turn the mics up, but they're up now. They're working. So, I mean, it's been almost 3 years now, and you'd think we'd have this worked out, but still not quite.
Yes, but sometimes in your sermon, your mic is off.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we found out the cause of that. This little...
Oh, you did?
Yeah, we did. There's a cord that connects the mic on my shirt to the little amplifier box. And that cord had a short in it. So I ordered a new one. I ordered a new one for $49, and since I put that on, I don't have any... That has not been happening, so... But that's cheaper than buying a whole new portable mic because that was going to cost like $700, so... Anyway, for $49, I think we got it fixed.
That's good.
Yeah, it's good. It is. So,
I'm glad that you got the Wednesday morning thing also set up.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to have to listen to the whole thing after my church, who is starting Bible study tomorrow.
Okay. So what time does that start?
It starts at 12.
Okay.
So, but half the time I'm in my pajamas still, so I got to get presentable.
Yeah. Are they doing it by Zoom? Is that study by Zoom?
No, they're going to do it in person.
Oh, okay.
So we're going to, somebody from the church is going to come pick me up.
Excellent. That's nice. That's very nice.
Yes, because I get some, chatting time with someone other than Sweetie, my squirrel.
Yes. How is Sweetie, by the way?
She's very busy with the acorns.
Oh, right.
And she's not paying much attention to me.
Oh.
So, but, none of the squirrels, nobody, only chipmunks are coming, chipmunks and birds. The squirrels there are acorn trees above my carport, and it goes bang, 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 bang.
That's right, because they cut them off and don't keep them in their teeth. Sometimes they drill them out and drop the hull.
Like a little drill.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, we don't, we do not, we only have one squirrel that I see, and I don't even see that one very often. I think the hawks and the foxes have cleaned them out. I think they've killed them all. We have
foxes?
Yeah, we have we have a lot of foxes. We have 2 dens in the backyard, and you can hear them this time of night coming into the fall. They start screaming for mating calls. It sounds like someone's being murdered.
Yeah, I know. The first time I heard it, I thought, oh my gosh, somebody is being murdered.
Yep, that's right. Hi, Debbie.
Yeah. Hello. You're talking about foxes, huh? Everybody's got them.
Yeah.
You never see them during the day, and you hardly ever see them, period, but you know they're around.
Yep. Well, we've been seeing them out out in the yard and stuff, and more than we ever have. So they used to say for every one you see, there's 10 more,
Yeah.
because they were sort of sleuthy. Hello, Barbara.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Well, I had trouble with video and audio tonight.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay. It's always one or the other thing, and it's just, I don't know. It just, could it, like for 3 or 4 weeks, just be easy?
Yeah, why would you want that to happen?
Right. Here comes Judy. Hello, Judy.
Hey. Hello.
Hi, hi.
Are you-
Coming back from the woods.
Are you feeling
Hi,
better?
Judy.
It's going in the right direction.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah. Yes, it's good to be back. It's good to see everybody. Yeah.
Yes, good to see you.
Yes, thank you. So it still sounds a little raspy, and yeah, but it's going in the right direction. So
That's good.
Good. I just got my COVID vaccine today, the new one.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
After hearing you last week, Judy, I was like, I'm not taking any chances.
Very good. The other one that the doctor told me to get is, but not right away, is the RSV.
RSV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's also an important one. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What else is something else? A Nuvia or something like that? I was just reading on the Bloomberg site.
And what's that for?
New thing in India.
Oh, I heard about it.
Another one, a variant?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not COVID, it's another disease.
Oh,
I
great.
think it was transmitted by bats as well, I read. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, boy.
So here we go.
That's what we need.
Yeah.
It's like Middle Ages, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like,
Yeah. Well, I don't know. There's that part where Jesus says you're going to hear wars and rumors of wars, and there'll be pestilence and disease, and don't worry, it's not the end of the world. So,
could have fooled us.
hey, I know, I'm counting on that. I think, Jesus, I hope you knew what you're talking about so many years ago, because, boy, sometimes it feels like there's a big ending is coming to something. Wow.
That's right. I know. Yeah.
I still haven't recovered my my center, my self center, ever since the worst of the COVID virus. That was a hollowing out experience for me. Wondering what would happen and where we were going to go together, who was going to survive and who was going to die, and it was big for me.
How long did you have it?
I only had it for, I don't know, 6 or 7 days, but I have lingering symptoms.
Long COVID?
I have lingering symptoms. I have a phlegm congestion in my lungs and in my throat that I cannot get rid of. I've never had it before. I'm constantly having to clear my throat. So
Are you taking cough medicine or something?
I've started now taking,
Pearls or something?
it's, what the heck is it? I can't think of it right now, but it's an anti-phlegm kind of thing. So
Yeah. Benzoate or something like that, anyway.
Tussin.
Six.
Yeah, I've been taking Tussin. Is that Melinda?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Melinda.
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
Linda.
Wow, it's nice. Kind of getting back here together. I guess because it's dark outside, right?
It's dark early, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Well, tonight we have arrived at like an oasis in the desert because we have arrived at one of, I don't know, people of faith and a variety of faiths treasure this Psalm 23, for how it breaks us open at important times when we read it. And I'm happy to be here discussing it. I think that's fun. Who else just logged on there? I can't see. Can you see who we should say hi? Oh, is it Alice?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Hi, Alice.
She's connecting to audio now.
Okay.
As you said.
What psalm are we on? What psalm are we on?
23.
Psalm 23, yes, I'm sorry, I stopped right there before it. So,
Hello, everybody.
hi Alice, hi,
Everybody.
hi,
Hey.
nice
I
to,
know I've been missing.
that's all right, we're so happy to be back together again like this, it's great. Yep,
I'm back. I'm not gonna be on camera because I don't want to scare anyone.
Oh, come
Well,
on.
well, listen,
And I might fall asleep. So if you hear snoring, I don't know. Somebody call me on the phone.
okay. Well, we're,
We're glad you're here.
yes,
Yeah.
it feels,
Good to see everybody.
Yes.
it feels good to be gathered together, doesn't it? It just feels good.
Absolutely.
Yep, it does.
Absolutely.
And you have a beautiful picture of yourself posted, so we'll just imagine that's how you're looking.
Yes, just imagine my lips moving. And
Yeah,
I'm talking.
that's right.
Okay, Melinda is still muted. I just tried to unmute her.
Yes, I'm still
Okay.
here. I'm just moving
Okay.
about, so I don't want to make the noise.
Okay,
Oh,
that's
okay.
fine.
Sorry about that. I thought I could wanted to hear your voice, so I thought I could do something, but, okay. As long as you know what you're doing
Yep, I'm still here.
and your
Have to
computer,
feed,
phone.
yes, I
knows.
just have to feed the husband.
Oh. All right, so why don't we begin? And somebody should read Psalm 23. And so let's do that and begin that way, shall we? Anybody?
You're all-
Somebody?
I can't find my Bible. It's hidden away in a box somewhere.
Okay.
So,
You don't know this one by heart?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, we could all say it in unison.
We could.
right. I don't know. I got a version on the phone, but I'm not sure if it's quite what I want to read, but.
Well, just jump in. Go ahead.
Okay, twist my arm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So, let me just ask a little different than I normally do. Can you remember a time or a setting in which this psalm took on deep and abiding meaning for you? Can you describe a memory of that?
I think because it's just so familiar, and usually the King James Version is the one that, because we used to recite it in school every day.
Yeah.
Because it's so very familiar, you have a tendency not to think too deeply about it. But, of course, it's a beautiful psalm, and that is why we always were asked to recite it. And I think it's the antidote to today's news.
Yep.
When I think about it now, it's after you've watched the awful news, then you can go back to Psalm 23 and feel a little bit better about the world. all the plagues and war and everything else that's happening, it's encouraging.
Yeah, and it's a profound statement. I mean, for me, in what I do, it comes up a lot. It gets read a lot. It's a part of my life, but it never fails to overwhelm me with emotion. I am always filled with emotion because I think the commentator says that this is one of the most profound statements of protection and provision. I like those two words together. This is protection and provision from God. And another place it says it's the most personal statement of a single person claiming the protection and provision of God. And so I think about very troubling times that I've been in, usually around funerals, especially if it's the funeral of someone I loved and cared about. And, you know, the group breaks into this psalm, and I'm just overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed because my life often gets caught up in sort of the antithesis of it, and that is like, well, who will protect me? You know, I feel exposed a lot and unprotected, and things that happen. And provision, you know, I've been through some times of my life where I just didn't know what would be the future, like what's going to happen next. And having experienced that and then feeling this profound proclamation, the Lord is my shepherd, and I will not know want. I will have what I need. I don't know. I just think it's an amazing set of words that stir deeply into our human experience.
Is it the shortest psalm?
I don't know. It might be. It's only 6 verses, right?
Right.
It might be. But it's as short as it is.
Right. It
It's,
has everything in it you
yeah,
ever
it's
needed.
yeah, it's so powerful. Another thing that was pointed out in the commentary that I read earlier today is so much of the Bible describes the relationship between God and human beings in the terms of the feudal system of Lord, or master, and servant. You know, Lord and servant. That image that is throughout the Scripture. And the parables that Jesus used, all about, you know, the Lord and the master of the household. This psalm almost uniquely uses the metaphor of the shepherd and the sheep. And it's a distinctively different relationship. You know, I don't care for the image of Lord. I don't like the word Lord. It reminds me of the feudal system, you know, because it always raises the specter of Lord and slaves. And I think it'd be great if we could move beyond some of those kinds of basic understandings in relationship to God. But when you make the basic metaphor that we are sheep and that God is the shepherd providing for us, my defenses all go down. They do. They just go down. And I like, yeah, give me that. I'm happy to be a sheep in the fold of God.
I just looked up what is the shortest psalm.
Yeah.
It's Psalm 117. Yeah, it's only 2 verses.
Oh.
It's
Right.
the shortest chapter in the whole Bible.
Well, there you
I
go.
just thought because we've read so many psalms that are, you know, they start out with this beautiful image and then they start getting a little more macabre. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, you know, this one leaves you on a high note.
Well, it sure does. And I mean, again, the commentators will talk about the fact that hidden in the language is the metaphor of the wandering in the wilderness and the longing of the Exodus They were longing, they were walking through the desert, and they're longing for green pastures. They were looking for a place to live, a place that they could sustain their life. And so the confidence that's found in the poem is that God leads us there. God leads us to the places where we can survive, even if we're in the middle of, dry desert lands. And then again, one of my favorites, because I don't know, I'm doing a lot of self-disclosure here. Feel free to jump in anytime you want to, but I am a very difficult person to calm down. You don't ever want the job of trying to calm me down. I might look calm on the outside, but I have a tremendous ability to be wound up and moving 100 miles an hour in my mind and my heart. And then you get to this place where what kind of a shepherd is God, that God leads you and says, now, look, the water is still, the grass is green. Will you please lay down? Will you please just lay down and rest? And I got this. I feel like that's the message that comes through. And again, I hear it a lot at funerals. I heard it at my dad's funeral and my mom's funeral, and I'm all stirred up in those environments. Stirred up with the biggest questions of life and death and loss. And then in the middle of it, this metaphor, this very strong and powerful poetry that says God, leads you. Even here, God leads you beside still waters and leads you to rest. So, I don't know. I think history's choice of this psalm is a good one. I get it.
It's a pretty perfect 6 verses, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to agree with that even though we've been reciting this for many, many, many years, to read it and still find comfort in it just speaks the power of the song itself.
Yep, I agree. It's just so clear. And another point that the commentators make is that it is the only place. Let me see if I can get this right. This psalm is distinctive in that the opening of the psalm lies in the use of the personal pronoun, my shepherd. Traditionally interpreted the communality of the flock, here it is given the most personal interpretation in the entire biblical tradition. There's no doubt about it. The psalmist, in a time where individualism and thinking of my and I and my, she says, the Lord is my shepherd. And it's outstanding in terms of its uniqueness, of its claim of the personal attention that comes from God, because every shepherd knows every sheep. Every single sheep is known by name.
Are there any comments about the rod and the staff? Because usually that to me would be more of a punishing kind of thing. But here it says they comfort me.
Right.
So assuming it means because God is leading us, and this is just pointing us in the right direction.
Well, the rod, the more literal translation of the rod is a club. Your club, your club comforts me. But the comfort there comes from the club or the rod was used to fend off wild beasts.
Right. I mean, you've got the shepherd metaphor. So the shepherd uses those 2 tools to protect the flock.
Right.
So I guess that's the point here.
And the crook would go right around the sheep's neck and pull them up off a cliff or pull them back in line as they tried to take off. The shepherd would, redirect the sheep. And so there's both of those two images provide comfort. One is protection from outside threats, and then the other one is protection from myself, sort of running off in the wrong direction and getting cut off from the flock. Those two things are basically control, but the ability to rest and to see it as a comfort.
In Sunday school, I was told that the crook was to save, put around the neck of a sheep that had fallen,
Yeah.
save his life.
Yep. Yeah, from any number of things. I mean, if you ever watch, you can still find videos of to me, the one place where shepherds and sheep are still very active are on the big sheep ranches in New Zealand, and where they use the dogs, the border collies that keep the sheep together. And what's amazing is how great a tendency there is for, there'll be a flock of maybe 400 or 500 sheep, and the dogs and the shepherd are moving them all along. But inevitably they have to watch because one of them will peel off and head off in their own direction. And then the dogs, they just take off like crazy. They don't bite the sheep, but they just go out there and they get on the other side of them and they bring them back. They put them back in the movement of the group where they'll have protection.
My daughter has a dog like that, and it hurts her
Yeah, I know.
by pushing his nose against her feet.
Yep. Yeah.
He guides her to the refrigerator where the dog food is.
Now that I would like, although I don't often need help getting to the refrigerator. It would be a greater protection for me if the dog would sit at the refrigerator and keep me away.
Stop you from eating.
Right, chase me away.
Oh, jeez.
When I
The sentence that sticks out for me too is, thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. It almost as though there's a softness, a gentleness in the beginning. He maketh me to lie, he leadeth me, he restoreth, and then he prepareth the table in the presence of mine enemies. I mean, it just seems like such a break. It seems like there's a tranquility, a gentleness, a leading, and even the enemies become more gentle. I don't know. It just seemed to jump out at me as I was reading it now. Yeah.
Every time I hear that part, I have to say, that's the one part where I have to really engage my heart and my mind because, in work as a pastor, I mean, I don't know the enemies of the people who were the psalmists. I don't know what an enemy meant, but when you're a pastor, it may surprise you to know that there are people who take up postures to be an enemy of you. There are. I mean, it's common conversation. We know there are people who in the movement of the church will be supportive and encouraging of what you're doing, and then there are people who will take up postures against you. And I have served a few churches where I knew there were people working behind the scenes. They were ready to stand up and make a motion that, this pastor get fired and, these initiatives. And it always seemed to me that before those kinds of meetings, somebody would plan a meal. And so there we are. There we are. We got to go in, sit down, the potluck supper, and got to sit down at that table. And there, here's God talking in my ear and saying, look, You need to calm down. Like, relax, I got this. And do you think I have ever been able to eat at one of those potluck suppers? Nope. I can't do it. I cannot eat in a meal before a congregational meeting. I can't do it. And yet I hear in the psalm, God is saying, for the longest time, my mind resisted the image even, because I don't have a sense that because there's a table, the enemies are less aggressive. But God says, think how different this is than what happens a lot in the other chapters of the Old Testament. God doesn't prepare a table in front of the enemies and says, okay, let's all just sit down and have a meal. In their minds, God gives them weapons and says, let's go out and kill them all, and then we'll make a meal of the spoils from their village, and that's where the banquet will come from. But this is a very, very, my heart always argues with God at this point and say, okay, so you say love my enemies. All right, I try, right? But do I really have to sit down and eat a meal? Because I get indigestion. Like I cannot eat in the presence of my enemies.
You're not saying the congregation is your enemy, are you?
I think the congregation see me as the enemy, so yes, I am.
Pastor Luke, keep in mind that we always fed you before you had session meeting.
Yes, I know, but I can tell you without blowing smoke, I never experienced your group as an enemy to me. Not once.
Okay, I don't think you were either. But when I think about that passage as far as preparing a table before my enemies, to me, it's God saying that I got this.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Just sit there,
Yep.
eat your food. There's nobody gonna come for you.
Yep.
So be comfortable in the setting that you're in.
Yeah, just relax.
Because I got your back.
Right. I agree.
Right.
I agree. 100% that phrase, I got this. I got this. I got this. And, I have a long history of serving in churches. And again, I don't think anybody that's been around churches is a stranger to the fact that, church leaders sometimes they play a game called Kill the Leader. Their books have been written about how human beings in community sometimes have not lost some of the tribalism that is a part of being in community. And that one of the things that you look out in nature, right? You see a pack of lions, and the first thing that happens is you see a fight because there's a contest for leadership. That kind of dynamic goes on in the beloved community. It just does. And so what I would try to do is exactly to say those words, or let this psalm say it to me, which is, look, God has chosen to set a table. Set a table for your needs, for your food, for whatever you need. And it just so happens that across the table from you is someone that you're pretty convinced doesn't have your best interest at heart. That's tough. Maybe it's not for you. I don't know, but it's tough for me. That's really tough.
It's becoming so politicized now too.
Yes, it's getting worse in that way.
And in different groups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When the conflict in churches was about church, or about decisions about church, or decisions about money in the church, I feel like we could talk even if we argued. But we've moved to a different place now, and I don't know how to travel in this new land because there's no middle ground to talk about. It's either or. And so there's a lot of churches, friends of mine pastoring churches that, we used to argue over the hymn book, and we used to argue over the budget, but now you have the differences politically that are felt by people are indescribable.
Right.
And so there's no language, and people leave. They leave,
That's right.
I don't know. I don't know what I don't know what the history of that is. Whether it's been, are there communities or places in history where that's happened before, and how did it resolve? How did it get worked out? I don't know. But it's hard.
But you're right. It's the language to create, a new rhythm, a new tempo, a new word. That hasn't really happened yet.
No. A common language where even if you're not interested in advancing one side or the other, I've survived in church communities for years. It's where I live. It's where I work. You had to learn how to develop a language where you could survive in a place where there were different points of view, but that you develop a commonality of language that allows you to be together. That allows you to talk and to share ideas and then to stay away from certain subjects. But that commonality of ideas is getting so small.
Yes.
That there's very little. And I have to say,
I heard someone, Anna DeVere Smith, in an interview, and she was talking about what she does is she brings two people who have completely opposite opinions together and then asks them to take the other person's point of view.
Socrates.
And she apparently has found it very successful in many places.
She does that. Are those people her friends that she knows are on opposite sides of issues?
No. This is like the president of a university and janitor, or
Okay.
we're not talking about political. Well, maybe there are some that she does political points of view, but it seems to be people who are in. I'm not sure if the president of General Motors and the president of the UAW would be. There are mediators. People have a friend who was union mediator in many ways, but she does it in front of an audience too. So and has found it quite successful, but you have to get people willing to do this, and not everyone would be willing to do it.
Well, that was ancient Socrates. That was called the Socratic method. Socrates would require his students to argue. You were not allowed to say that you were of a certain position unless you could argue and win the argument from the opposite point of view. So if you could win the argument on the other side, that meant that you fully understood your own position. But that takes a lot of work and effort. We don't have much time for that these days. It's just a lot of sharing of our expert opinions.
I like the idea of sharing a meal, though. It's hard, to be angry with someone that you are sitting down with, sharing the God's largesse, and second of all, your mouth is full.
That's right.
Instead of vitriol. Yeah.
No, and listen, I think that is worldwide with human beings. Now, I haven't been all over the world. I don't know everything about all the human beings in the world, but at least history shows us that when it came time to try to remember over and over and over again to find a central image of the ministry of the life and death of Jesus, the truth is it was not the cross. The cross became a symbol. But the symbol, the overwhelming symbol of the spirit and the ministry and the life of Jesus of Nazareth was a table. It was a table where we would be invited to come and we would sit together and we would eat. And in the first century, that was all there was to Christianity. They didn't have the liturgies because Jewish people still went to their synagogues and they still did their liturgies. And people of other religions still went to their own religious home. But the agape feasts took place on Sunday morning, and people would come from all walks of life. And the hallmark of what this new community was about people, soldiers and slaves, and the rich and the poor, and women and men seated together and eating the love feast. And there's not as far as I can read, they didn't do a lot of writing down. They didn't write down what they agreed about. They ate together. And it sustained the church for more than 100 years. It was the eating together and the willingness to lay down whatever differences there were and to come together in a blend of lives and cultures, and to do that in the spirit that they had learned from Jesus, who invited the tax collector to his house and who was always going to somebody else's house to sit down and eat with them. And in a very practical way, that was, and I wish sometimes that was the theology of Jesus. It was. And he took that from what he believed was the more true and ancient theology of the Hebrews in hospitality. You know, I still, you know, I argue with God. I'm in the middle of this reverie of the 23rd Psalm, and then I argue with God a little bit when it says God, you know, sets a table before me in the presence of my enemies. And I look up at God and go, what'd you do that for? I was, you know, I was just feeling good, you know. You're going to lead me to green pastures. You're going to feed me. And then what did you set a table? Look, can we just get up and run away? Could we just run? How about you help me? And we'll just run from my enemies. No.
Yeah, I think that the idea of a full table also implies that God is with you.
Yes.
That God is satisfying your needs. There's a surah or a chapter in the Quran called Al-Ma'idah, which means the full table. And it's a recollection about Jesus, the disciples asking Jesus to ask God to send down a full table of food. And it's one of the miracles of Jesus that's recounted in the Quran. And there's also a miracle where God sends the same thing, a table full of food to Maryam, or Mary, the mother of Jesus. And I think the implication in both cases is that God is our sustenance. God will provide. They're beautiful passages. There's no mentions of enemies, but there's the comfort and the provision of God, I think, is implied.
Yeah, and that reminds me of Peter's vision, you know, in the early stages of the church, where there's all kinds of arguments over what food is proper and what food isn't proper. And Peter has a dream, and in that dream, a table comes down from heaven. A table comes down and is set in front of him, and in the dream, he says, I can't eat, you know, pointing to all the divisions. And the voice of God says, get up and eat, you know, just get up and eat. And in that fulfillment of that dream, that vision of Peter, his heart is melted toward Paul and towards Gentiles, and the very first unity of the church among cultures and traditions, even of the Jewish faith that were semi-Christian. That's the first sign of any real unity that takes place among them, and it's around a table full of bounty of God. And and you know, when God sets a table before us in the presence of our enemies, so that maybe the approach to having enemies and people is to just remember the bounty of God, live into the bounty of God, because I think it's, at least for me, it's this, enemies can make me worry about scarcity. They make me feel deprived. And
Yeah.
you know, it's hard to feel those two things at the same time, to be in a bountiful feast, when at the same time you're, I don't know, and maybe it's also the effect it has on the enemies. If, you know, if the enemies come to get you and they find this great big banquet, and you say, hey, listen, before we fight, how about we eat? You know, yeah, how about we eat?
Also doesn't say to prepare a table with my enemies.
No, it doesn't.
It says in the presence. So even though there are enemies there, God is still giving the sustenance.
Yeah, and that clicked right away to Judas. The story of Jesus and Judas at the Last Supper. There Jesus is, sitting at the table, and he's aware that one who is determined to become his enemy is sitting with him, and they break bread together.
Right?
They share in it. It doesn't stop the enemy from proceeding against Jesus, but I don't know, it's a moment in God's time. This is God's earth. This is God's life. And the more we can lean into that, how much better off we will be. We might be dead from our enemies, but we'll still be in God's care. You know? The other thing that came to my mind again when I was reading this is that, you know, I grew up partly on a farm and lived the farmer's life and the relationship between the farmer and the animals. And my grandfather was one of those kinds of farmers. He had 45 cows that he milked every day, twice a day. But then he also had a whole variety of, like 70 or 80 calves and heifers that were on their way to become milking cows. And he knew the cows. He knew them. They had names. Their names were often too technical from the breeders, so he had his own little version of the names. And all the cows had a number on their ear, but he didn't go by the numbers, he went by their names. And he knew the animals. And it was a lot of animals to keep track of, you know. I couldn't barely keep track of 4 kids. But he knew the animals, and he knew their peculiarities, and he knew where they were in terms of the gestation cycle, so he knew how much of the enriched grain to give that cow that day, and where that all was. And it was enormous impression that it made on me as a child, seeing the knowledge that this human being had of this herd of cows. And it also meant that for the dairy farmer, they could almost never take time away. They could not take a vacation.
Right.
Because nobody knew the cows like he did. And nobody
Isn't
knew.
it also a sign of reverence for the animals to give them names rather
Yes.
than just numbers?
Yes.
You know, when we put people in prison, we give them a number. They're
Right.
no longer a named human being. That takes something away. But he giving these animals names, I think it's beautiful.
Yeah. I have to confess, as a child, it wasn't always a very romantic relationship between me as a child and those cows. Because they weigh 600-700 pounds, and I weighed all of 70 pounds soaking wet, and I was the one who had to try to get them to do what I wanted them to do. So I'm just saying I had a few choice names for those cows too. but it was personal, but it wasn't endearing. And they, I don't have as much experience with it, but they say that the relationships that develop between sheep and their shepherd is, it's mind-blowing. It's just incredible the distances that can be crossed in the relationship between a human and a creature. It's incredible. And
You know, there's something on on the internet every now and then. I'll just kind of go by it quickly of men with monkeys,
yeah,
with giraffes, with donkeys, with alligators. I mean, you would just never think, you know, that that kind of animal could have a relationship with a human being.
yeah,
It's amazing, and they do it. And they do name them too. Yeah, I mean, the alligator has a name, and you know, Willie is somebody, and it's just, you know, it's incredible. You know, you wonder if it's really true, but it looks like it is. Yeah.
and how much more poetic or beautiful to create a metaphor for God's relationship to human creatures, to go into the world of the relationship between humans and our animals, to represent that. That's why I said I resent the images of slave and Lord and master. You know, Jesus is my Lord and Savior. I mean, I get the awesomeness of that expression, but I don't like the feudal system that is implied in it. I just don't. There's a hierarchy in there that I think is not represented. I mean, doesn't Jesus? Yeah, he does. He says at one point, "Do not call me Lord." He says, "Do not call me Father, because you have one Father which is in heaven. Do not call me Teacher, and do not call me Lord." Why don't we ever listen to Jesus? You know, it's
But here it is God that is being called Lord. But that still is little, you know, it's too much like king to me.
It
And
is.
I
right.
don't view God as a king because that it's just too controlling, I guess. You know, I know God might be all powerful, but he's not. God is not. I'm sorry, I said he. I don't think of God as he, but God is not controlling. And when you say Lord, I think of someone who's lording it all over
Yeah.
you or something.
Yeah.
Then
Or-
what is the name that's acceptable?
God. God.
Yeah, I mean, the Hebrews had names for God that were actually names. They were names, like they meant provider. I think El Shaddai was a name they had, or Elohim. Yahweh, Yahweh, which means, and throughout the oldest part of the Old Testament, Yahweh was if they referred to God by name, they referred to God as Yahweh, which points to, you know, the infinite, the above all and beyond all. And then when Moses asked God to say, "What is your name?" so that I can tell Pharaoh who it is that sent me, God replies to Moses, "I am that I am."
Right? It's kind of infinite.
Yeah.
In Islam, God has 99 names. The idea being all these things that you can think that God is possible. And even beyond that, things you don't know is still possible with God. And the God, you know, the names that make me feel best about God are the ones where God's the provider, or like
Right.
here, God is the shepherd, or God is the bountiful, God is the merciful. I like those images, and but everything is included in there because I think we, as human beings, we can't comprehend all the essences of God and everything that God is. So I think that gives you a little leeway to say, God can be this, God can be that. Yeah. But in this case, in this psalm, this is the most benevolent God. You know, this is the most benevolent face of God. I love this this image of God as protector, as shepherd, as provider. It's lovely.
Yeah, it is. It's the most accessible. I mean, it's accessible and gives the freedom on the other end for me to be a sheep. I mean, I don't offer myself as the expert of life. I'm just a sheep. I'm just walking through, you know, and that there is one who is a shepherd and is a shepherd of my life. And then also the fact that it moves into the valley of the shadow of death. That God is not just the shepherd through the green pastures and still waters. That God is a shepherd there when death looms and when grief threatens to overtake us. God is still walking with us as a shepherd and protecting us and providing for us comfort and strength in those difficult times.
And I don't think it's bad to think of yourself as a sheep. I guess most of the time we take that as an insult, like we're just following something blindly. But to be a sheep
Right.
of a benevolent shepherd means that you are loved, you are known. Like you were saying with the story about the farmer with his cows, he knew each one of them intimately.
Yes, yes.
And as a sheep, that can be our relationship to God as well, that God knows us, knows what we need, and will provide it.
Yeah, and it's the simplicity of it also makes it enormously applicable across a lot of human experiences. Because it's not difficult to get what the psalmist is saying. It's not difficult at all. You know, you have a provider, a protector who knows you intimately. And who is with you in this life. And by the way, again, to your comments about, I don't also care at all for the idea of royalty, king or queen. I don't. Because in some ways, to me, the king is always aloof. The king is up and above and away from the experience. The shepherd is right on the road with the sheep. You know, when it's time to bed down at night, the shepherd has to sleep in the fields and build a shelter for himself as well, or herself. There's an enormous egalitarianism in this image. And that, again, it's why I just love it. I just love it. No one has ever come up to me and said, can you explain to me this horrible image that's in Psalm 23? It's just not there. It's great comfort to believers and non-believers, to people who practice faith and those who don't. The language of it crosses all those boundaries. It's beautiful. It's just absolutely beautiful.
Unfortunately, there are many more Psalms after this.
Yes. Did you have to bring that up?
Sorry about
Spoiler alert.
yeah, some of them may be wonderful too.
Well, it makes me wonder. I mean, sometimes the commentators go at great length and try to say, okay, when was this psalm written? And how was the world different to the writer of this psalm than to a lot of the others? That many of the psalms are written in the depth of the time of kings and queens. And so a lot of the psalms are about the king. And the king is a worthy reference to God. If the king survives, that means God is with them, or the king is God. They get that far sometimes, that, you know, the king has the power, the armies, the protection, and controls the food. And so a lot of the psalms are about that. But this, I don't know, this comes from a different time. I have an idea they didn't have the setting of the kings in the background. I don't know.
Do the scholars have any idea? I mean, because a lot of them say Psalm of David, probably not written by anyone named David, but
Yeah.
Do they know anything at all about, you know, the author? Or?
I can read to you what it says here in this one commentator that I really like. The sheer diversity of views is a clear indication of the most fundamental problem with respect to the interpretation of the psalm. It is that the language of the psalm is not specifically explicit to establish any time or place of its original sense or setting. So in and of itself, it's a kind of an anonymous it's anonymous setting. It's an anonymous time, and in some way, it's timeless. You know, you get that feeling. It's a psalm for all time and all places, and you can read it today. Now, a lot of people from the greatest generation have fallen in love with the psalm in the King James, and so when you read it, they want to hear it in the King James. And I still like it in the King James. In some ways, I don't know, because that's how I memorized it when I was a child. But the newer translations of it are just as fresh. They're just as clear. And as long as you're not sitting around getting angry at the pastor because he didn't use the King James Version, then it'll still provide the same level of comfort. Anything else? Any other thoughts or comments about the...
I don't know. I keep thinking of the word choice, and I'm not sure why it pops up in my mind or what it has to do with this. But choice. People who decide not to go to the other side. I don't know. I just it seems as though there's a commonality and an agreement and a harmony, and then I wonder, but are there also people who are, if there's such a word, dishonest? Is everybody all on the same page? I don't know why I think of the word choice and why it keeps coming up in my mind. Is it that everyone does agree and everyone is prayerful and all men are created equal, or all men are good and so forth? I don't know. Are there exceptions? I guess that's what I'm wondering. And I don't even know where this comes from in my mind, but I just wonder.
Well,
They're all loving and kind, and caring, and agreeing to walk with God.
So in listening to you say that, my mind was also trying to listen for what you were hearing. And I'm taken again to that first phrase, the Lord is my shepherd. There's a choosing in there. There is a choosing. It's saying that God is my shepherd, but the Lord is my shepherd. My shepherd. And the choice is there to choose God and saying that God is my shepherd. Listen, there are people who live in the world who think money is their shepherd. And there are people very visible in the world today who believe that power and especially military might is the shepherd of all human beings. So I do think since you raised it, I think there is a declaration, a choice, if you will, that is declared right up front. The Lord is my shepherd.
So my is the key word.
Yeah, it's owning it.
My is the key word.
It's owning it, saying, the Lord is my shepherd. Now, up until you said that, I was thinking a lot about God, the Lord is my shepherd, like the Lord's chosen me. Like the Lord put me in God put me in the flock. But there is also a sense in which, especially if you read it with the right inflection, you can say, you pursue wealth or you pursue popularity, well, the Lord is my shepherd.
Right.
know.
So the my is the
Yeah,
key.
the Lord, and then, yeah, and then especially because the psalmist goes on to describe what that means. You know, the Lord is my shepherd. I don't know about yours. I don't know where yours leads you, but I have an idea. You're going to find that if money is your shepherd, you're going to find that money will lead you into anxiety and early death and unhappiness. But the Lord is my shepherd.
It's good. Yeah, it's good. Thank you.
I just have a problem in the sense that I don't know if everyone has the opportunity or has the background for that to happen for them. And, you know, I try to understand why for some people power or money are their shepherds.
Yeah.
And, you know, is there something in their makeup that causes that to happen? Now, I just feel fortunate that I was able to do it. And I guess I think of my husband, who always said he wishes he had the faith that I have, that it's something that's lacking in him. But he just didn't have it. And I think a lot of people don't have it. And so they search for something as to take its place.
Yeah.
But, you know, other than going out and evangelizing.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
going to say, but I think the choice can be, you can think of that as well. Barbara, there was your opportunity to win somebody for Jesus, and you didn't take it. You didn't do it. You should have driven him crazy, right? Or, if you go back to what we work on in this study, which is, what is the purpose of the chosenness of the people who were chosen, the ancients that were chosen, and we who now have faith? What are we chosen to? I am not convinced that we're chosen to convince those who don't believe. I think instead, we should live in such a way that people who do not have faith will count themselves lucky to know us.
Right.
And that they will...
Well, the action, faith in action.
Yeah.
So, you know, I can't imagine, you know, that's why I guess contemplation, spirituality, you know, worship, all to me are to spur me to act in a God, you know, way that God wants me to.
Yeah, and
There's some tribes that proselytize that's part of their faith.
yes. Yeah, there are certainly. I mean, listen, a lot of the history of the expansion of Christianity into the United States and in North America and all around was driven by the idea that, at least, let me say this, I'm not sure I buy it altogether, but I'll see if I can organize it. Ostensibly, the driving force was we need to preach and teach people about the gospel of Jesus Christ so they can confess Jesus as their Savior, and then they can be saved and they'll be spared from hell, right? So ostensibly, that's the mission. That's the mission. But if you look at the effect of those missionaries' zeal of Christianity, the effect had much more to do with economics, exploitation. It had a lot to do with subjugation of people, putting them under our realm, taking advantage of them. And so, you know, I'm suspicious. I know that the Spanish explorations out of Spain, signed by Ferdinand and Isabella, I know that ostensibly the idea was they were trying to find a trade route for spices and stuff, but there were other motives, especially once they realized that there were people and lands and places that could be conquered. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, the mission of Jesus Christ, I don't know, it starts to look an awful lot like us. Again, our need to be in control, to tell people how to talk or tell them how to think. And I don't know, I just think that we could be a lot more fulfilling the blessing that God intended through people of faith to the families of the earth if we would just believe and practice our belief. You know, if we would just do that, if we could just get that organized to practice our belief and to live into it, maybe some would be converted, maybe some would begin to believe. I'm sure there would be some who would think, wow, you know, help me, I want to believe like you do. But there also would be some who would say, I am so glad I ran into you on the globe here, and that, you know, you have provided so much benefit and grace. Tell me where that comes from. And you get to say, well, you know, that's from my faith in God. But it's not about trying to convert them. And I think nowadays we have the opportunity to be more like that to each other than we ever have before, because transportation and the breakdown of our tribal existences in the world we're mingling around the globe. You know, we're traveling around the globe, and our differences are and we're having a chance to be nice to each other, you know, and to be kind and not to be afraid of each other and not to try to annihilate the other. I see that as the movement of God in the earth.
But right now, it looks as though there are two sides, at least two sides, that are shoring up for whatever we don't know is going to be. But we read about it every day.
Yeah.
And it's frightening.
Yeah. The significant individuals in the world have not given up on the idea that war is the pathway to the future.
Right.
That war is what will accomplish, you know, control and protection and all the rest of it. So I would say of those people, when they read their 23rd Psalm, they would say, "War is my shepherd." You know, and you know, I get it. I'm not immune to fear. I don't want to live without the ability to defend myself either. I don't. I'm not a pacifist. But I also do not think that the pathway forward for our existence on this planet is going to be a pathway carved out by war. I don't. And yet, I don't know. I think there's an awful lot of people today who believe it is.
Right.
Yeah, kind of ironic for someone to think that war is your path to peace.
Yeah, right.
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 How ironic, yeah.
And I think what war still represents mostly for us is the ability to keep what we have. You know, it's the worry that somehow what we have is going to be taken away or that it'll be diminished. And that's what pushes us to war.
Right.
It's to keep what we have, to defend what is ours.
And to take more
Yeah, or to take more.
that doesn't belong to us.
Right.
Yeah.
And there again, how much does the telling of history live in the reading of history? Because again, if you read the history of Israel and you look at the rise of David, King David came to power in a cry for self-defense. The people wanted to be able to defend themselves, and they built the walls of the city of Jerusalem, and they developed a system of farming in the valleys, but the people could retreat inside the walls of the city. When they were invaded, it was about self-defense. And then another idea occurred to them. The other idea was, why don't we go to where these armies are coming from and wipe them out? Why don't we go there? Let's get pumped up. We can be the invading armies.
Preemptive strike, right?
Preemptive strikes. And it worked on the first one, and then David was a skilled strategist for how to do this. to lay siege to cities until they choked to death, and all the wealth, the gold, the whatever was taken and began. Well, this is pretty good business. You know, this thing of self-defense can make you rich. And they did it. And, you know, and then they started to declare that was the meaning of peace. You know, so David was the king of peace. He was of course it was peaceful. It's just like Rome declared Pax Romana, peace throughout all the kingdom of Rome. Well, it was peaceful because if you squeaked, you were killed. You know, that was just Rome's strategy. You know, all was peaceful in the Roman Empire because anybody that was disturbing the peace would be removed.
It's like that. Is in Russia becoming more that?
I do. I think so. I don't know. I can't prove it because the communication is so broken to be able to find out for ourselves. But I think China is definitely sold into that idea that, you know, there'll be peace when there's control. So, you know, the government is my shepherd.
That's right.
And I will not want.
That's right.
So how are we supposed to learn from these experiments of history? I think there are places that are different. There are places, even here in the United States, there are people who are not sold on those ideas, and they're sold more on building community and sharing. And there's a lot of initiatives that go on around that. I don't know whether it's the fault of the news that we don't learn that much about it, or whether it just is in such small proportion. I don't know. Well, what do you want to do? Do you want to read another psalm? Or shall we stay in the reverie of Psalm 23?
Time.
What did you-
14 minutes.
What did you say?
There's 14 minutes. I don't think
Yeah, so
we
let's
can go on.
let's just go out in the reverie and the meditation of Psalm 23. How about maybe if somebody reads it again? Let's read it again.
Sure, I can read.
Okay.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Let that be words that go with you into the night and into your sleep and into your waking in the morning. May those words guide you and encourage you and protect you to lean ever more and more on the presence of God in your life.
Amen.
Good night, my friends. Thank you for being a part of this discussion.
Thank you.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Thank you.
Have a blessed rest of your week, everyone.
It's good to be back together. It is.
Stay well.
And thank you to those online. Thank you for your presence and your listening. May the blessing of God in this psalm be with you as well.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.